G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I want to do a very simple video to help explain differences in bullets. I go through a little tiny bit of unpacking some of that terminology that a lot of people don't understand. It's only us in the shooting world that really understand it all. Bullets, like I said, to start off with, a very simple bit in the equation. A bullet is the piece in the end of a cartridge, in the end of a round. This is not a bullet, that piece is. So when you see the guys saying how many bullets are on your belt, well, that's not a bullet, that's actually a round. It's the piece in the end, the piece that travels through the air. So here's a couple of, you'll see there and there and there and there are actual bullets. The rest of those are cartridges. I've got this sort of set up here to do some talking about bullets and what they do. Some of that terminology I was talking about, there's probably 3 or 4 main bits that go into this part of the equation. One is internal ballistics, one is external ballistics, another is terminal ballistics, and then the final one regarding that is ballistic coefficient. Quick breakdown of that. Internal ballistics is what happens, the powder going bang, the explosion that actually sends the bullet off out the barrel. That's the internal ballistics. So that's really talking about the cartridge, it's talking about the powder, it's talking about the chamber shape, it's talking about what's going inside there. And very relevant to the conversation, well, its relevance is the speed that the bullet travels at because of the internal ballistics. External ballistics is the bullet traveling through the air. How it travels through the air, how much the air affects it, how much gravity affects it, the actual arc of the bullet as it travels. For those that don't understand, a bullet, when it actually is fired out of a rifle, it accelerates as the powder burns, as the explosion, as the gases expand from the explosion that push it down the barrel. It goes down the barrel. In all rifles we're talking about, they have rifling, so they have like a thread cut in the barrel that pushes the bullet down the barrel. It spins as it accelerates, so it goes with that thread to it ends up with forward motion and spin. So it's actually twisting. The spin's about stability. But once it leaves the barrel, everything stops accelerating. From that point forward, the bullet is decelerating, and from that point forward, the bullet is actually falling. Even if it's shot upwards, it is gradually starting to the point where it actually falls. That's the nature of how a bullet travels. They are a bullet. A missile is different. A missile has its own power, has its own energy and pushes. A bullet simply has its inertia and its shape has to push through the air, so it's fighting resistance from the air and it's fighting the force of gravity, which are pushing it back down. That's the fundamentals of that. The next bit, which is terminal ballistics, is talking about what happens when the bullet hits what it's stopping on. When the bullet stops, whether it explodes things or it punches straight through things or it does whatever it does, that's terminal ballistics. I'm not going to go into that one very much, but it is part of what we're looking at here. It's very much part of the design of a bullet. You see a couple of bullets here. This is more of a long range. This is a 338 Lapua round. This round is shaped for traveling through the air. It's very efficient shape, and I'll get into that a little bit. The one next to it is another 300 grain bullet that comes out of a round like this, or which a rifle that shoots this, which is actually a 45-70 or a 45 long Colt. It's a 45 caliber, which is the diameter of the bullet, and you see it's got a lead end on it. That's because it's made for the soft lead is made to deform when it hits what it's going for. So really about hunting. So it actually does creates a bigger hole where it's going, which means that it does a far more ethical job to kill something and make it stop. So that's in a hunting design. And not get too much into it, like I said, it is part of what's going on with bullets. It's part of the shape of them, but to be kept in mind that some bullets are for some things and some bullets are for other things. So let's get back to external ballistics and the differences in bullets, which is really what I want to talk about. These are a couple of good cases here to talk about, and I'll go through why that is. Basically, there's two main features that affect a bullet in its traveling, in its path as it passes through the air. As said, there's gravity and there is wind resistance, the air it's pushing through, which affect it. And it fights that in two different ways. One is with inertia. It uses Isaac Newton's laws in physics, which is every force has an equal and opposite force, which is largely getting into the level of inertia. And that's what really we're talking about. The heavier a projectile is, bullet, projectile, that's the same bit. The heavier that is, the more energy it takes it to get moving, but once it's got to full speed, the longer it takes to slow down. That's the simple part of weight. I can draw an analogy, or I can explain that best, is if I have two exactly the same size balls, one of them's made out of foam lather, bubbles out of the bath, or a very light polystyrene or that type of thing, so it's super light, weighs nothing, almost floating on my hand, it's that light. The other one's made out of lead. This one, the foam, super lightweight ball, it takes nothing to actually push, no inertia or anything like that, very easy, but when I let go of it, it's just going to flop down there. No matter how fast I throw my arm, it's just going to stop. Wind resistance will stop it and it'll fall to the ground. The lead one, put that there, throw it, going to need a decent arm because it's going to take a fair bit to push it. But when I get it traveling at whatever speed I get it traveling at, it is going to travel as far as it can. The resistance of wind isn't going to affect it at all because it's so heavy. Gravity is going to push it to the ground, so it just becomes how strong I am as to how far it'll go. So that's a simple analogy to talk about weight. The next thing I can talk about is I can take exactly the same weight things, and then it's the shape of them affects things. If I take exactly the same weight, but it's a cardboard box, and I go to throw that cardboard box, which is a metre square, and I have that in that comparison to the likes of a broomstick. They weigh exactly the same thing. The cardboard box, when I throw it, once again, is just going to stop. I take that broomstick and throw it. Probably if I do a good enough job, I'll get it 50 metres down the road. And that's because of the shape of it. The broomstick's a reasonably good analogy when it comes to a bullet because it also needs to be stabilised to stop. If it stays travelling dead straight, it's going to fly very well. If it flips up and starts to flip around, it's going to fly nowhere near as well. But I'll get into that in a little bit. But that's the weight and that's the area, the more slippery we're talking about. Another good analogy to understand or description to understand bullet shape and how it affects things is you have to consider that what air is actually a fluid. That means that there's resistance to it. Now, flapping your arms around in the house, you're not going to feel very much. Stick your hand out the window at 100 miles an hour and you'll find there's a lot of resistance that's trying to tear your arm off. Don't stick your hand out at 100 miles an hour, but you get where I'm coming from. What we're actually talking about there is best and easiest probably explained or looked at if you go and look at a boat. When you look at a boat that travels through fluid, it's basically you have a barge or a tugboat in a very square shape, doesn't travel very fast, uses lots of horsepower, can move things with lots of energy in its horsepower, but it's not going to be very fast. You compare that with an ocean racing boat, which is long and pointy, that you can actually see, and that's what they do. They probably have even not quite the horsepower or similar horsepower and travel very easily, very fast. Well, bullets, we have a couple here, 300 grain bullets. You can see very much the difference. This is short and fat. This one's actually made to travel effectively out to probably 150 yards, 200 yards at the most. This one here, exactly the same weight, a little bit narrower, but long and pointy. It's made to travel out to over a mile in its effective range. Both of them will travel a lot further than that, but we're talking about when they've still got good speed. And when we talk effective ranges, we talk where they still have enough speed to do enough in their terminal ballistics to cause whether it's death or injury or whatever it is that they're doing, they have that energy and still at that place. I should side note there slightly. People ask how far will bullets kill, how far are bullets deadly, that sort of stuff. There's two completely different answers to that. One is I just mentioned, that's effective range. and that's when the bullet is traveling fast enough to do its job ethically. Largely talking about hunting ranges, where it is able to go through and cause enough percussive shock, and by the shape of the design of the bullet, be able to create a wound channel to where it can ethically kill what it's doing in that side of things. And in a target round, then it's something that can do what it's got to do, whether it's got to clang the target or whatever it is, but its effective range is what we're talking about with effective range. Very different when we talk about where things are still deadly to, or where they will still kill to. Simple analogy I have to go with that, simple thing, is if the bullet's still in the air, consider it deadly. Now that doesn't mean it's effective, that doesn't mean it's going to do its job well, but you only need a little hole in you in the right place and you're not going to go so well. Your day's finished, your life's finished. So when you consider a range, it's something to understand that's what we talk about with backdrops, that's what we talk about with safe space, that's what we talk about how far the bullet can go. We're talking miles, we're talking 5 and 6 and 8 and 10 miles in some cases is how far that is still dangerous. So that's what it is, not effective, that's how far it can still do serious harm, death. Anyway, so that's a bit of that side of things and what we're talking about in that side of it. If we come back into the another place where we are not talking obviously weight, these have the same inertia, but one's made very square, doesn't travel so well. The other one's made very nice shaped, so it's very smooth, very slippery, travels a lot better. We can also look at that in another section down here where we have exactly the same caliber bullets, and you can see something going on here. This is a 175 grain. It's actually, that's its bullet. This is the actual round, which is a 308. This is one next to it is 230 grains, and this is its round, which is out of a 300 Win Mag. You'll notice, well, one of the things that's going on here is the same style of bullet. This is a jacketed, so it's got a thin copper jacket over a lead center. This style of bullet, you can see what actually happens when you get different weight bullets is they end up different lengths. Now that causes a couple of things to understand. One is, for the simple understanding of it, is the larger a bullet is versus its caliber, the more spin it needs. So we do the spin is done by twist in the barrel, but it means that you can't just put any bullet in any, even though it's the right size, it doesn't necessarily have the right spin. So it's something you have to understand if you're looking at going into it, starting to understand it. It's a bit that you have to understand what your rifle is, and you should make note of what spin that is, or what twist that is, because that will change what you're buying in the way of bullets. So what we can see here is very clearly there's different lengths in these bullets. That, even though they're the same caliber, they're both a pretty nice shape, that extra long makes it more efficient, and it also has extra weight, so it becomes a lot better at traveling through the air. I'll unpack that other word at the moment, and that is ballistic coefficient, BCs. You'll hear people talking about that sort of stuff. That it is a intensely complicated thing to fully understand it, but the simple bit, really simple thing to understand, is it is those two features. One is the inertia of the bullet, so the heavier it is, the more inertia it has, the bigger BC it has. And the other is the shape of it, and that is the slipperier it is. That's with it having a boat tail, having a long, it's a spitzer nose, there's all sorts of other complicated words I can bring into it, but the slipperier the shape it is, the bigger BC it has. The BC, or the ballistic coefficient, what we use that for is so we can actually put that into an equation, put it into a table, put it into a ballistic app, put it into your iPhone with an app on it. There's all sorts of ways to do this, but that number is what helps us work out the trajectory, and that number, or that once we understand that, then we can do the maths to where we know where to dial our scope into. So it is quite easy to use, but that's what it is, and it is quite complex, all the details that are involved with it. There's all sorts of stuff that gets into it. You don't need to confuse yourself with that. The heavier the bullet is and the shape of it are what affect that. And we come back to these two here. This has a terrible ballistic coefficient because it's an ugly shape, and it's fatter than this one here that's thinner, and all that's exactly the same weight, has a very good coefficient. So that's that. Different sizes, same sizes, different weights, so they end up with different lengths, but that's what's going on there. Over here is another section of the same sort of conversation. You'll see all these bullets in rounds, so you can't see the bottom of them, but they're all very good shaped bullets. They're nice and slippery shapes. But because of the different weights, this little one here, which is a 17 caliber bullet, 0.17 of an inch. This is a 6.5 millimeter, and this is, which is the 0.264, and this one here is a 50, so it's a half an inch in diameter. As you can see, all very slippery shapes, but dramatically different in their sizes. And what that causes is this little one here, even though it's nice and slippery and it's got a decent amount of powder compared to the side of the bullet in comparison, all that sort of stuff, it still has a very small ballistic coefficient, which means it still only is effective at a very close range, 150, 200 yards sort of thing. The one in the middle here, very long slippery shaped bullet, pretty good ballistic coefficient, good amount of powder, very effective, but not even close to this here. This is 17 grains, this is 150 grains. Here we're talking 850 grains. So the distance where this is effective to, or will travel to, is a lot further. So size matters, diameter matters, weight matters, it all matters, but it's all quite simple. The slipperier the shape, the more mass it's carrying, the further it'll go. Understand, of course, there's another part to this equation, is that bigger isn't always better. There is more recoil going on, the firearms become heavier, they become harder to shoot. There's all sorts of things that are involved with it, but for the simple explanation of what we're talking about, when people are talking about or asking things, and I've run into this a few times, the most obvious place that people get confused is they'll see a shot we've done at 2,500 yards sort of thing, and using a heavy bullet for the rifle that we're shooting. And there's a lot of comments that I've seen, questions I've seen that say, well, why don't you use the smaller bullet? Because the smaller bullet, you can make it go faster, so it'll do that easier. Well, this is what my topic's about, is the fact that the smaller bullet doesn't have that ballistic coefficient, the smaller bullet doesn't have the inertia and doesn't have the slippery shape. So although that smaller bullet is really super effective at the closer ranges, and it's the better choice, if you're only shooting 100 yards or 200 yards or 500 yards, it can be the better choice. Once we go to shooting extreme distances that we shoot, that bullet is not even in the race. The heavy bullet starts to win. Yes, we do have to get the right twist in our barrel, so we do have to buy the right rifles or build the right rifles to be able to do that sort of shooting. But a light bullet, even exactly the same round, even though it looks very similar, and you could take these two here, these 30 cals, and you could put this light bullet in this bigger round and be very effective up to 500 yards. It would be super efficient, super fast, still good energy, all that sort of stuff, but it wouldn't do anywhere near as well as this bigger bullet, even though it starts off slower, and even though the lighter round in there would be more effective at 500 yards and faster and do the job easier and all sorts of stuff. Once it's got to 1,000 yards or a little bit further, then the big one takes over. And once you go out to the extreme ranges, then the little one's not even in the race. It can't even get there in any effective form. It's got a great big arc by the time it gets there, whereas the big one does it very efficiently and are very effective out there. Another little segue I'd go there, that is not about hunting. So the extreme long range is not about hunting. It's not an ethical thing to do. Yes, it is still deadly, but it is not an effective way to do things. It is far more likely to cause injuries and problems to deal with, and that's another conversation, but this is not the ELR sort of stuff. These big heavy bullets are not about hunting. This is about target shooting. There can be other reasons to do that sort of stuff, but yeah, not about hunting. Anyway, listen, that's what I wanted to touch into. I have some other ones here I wanted to show you. This is the 45 caliber in these pair of 300 grain bullets. Was this over here where they come. This is a 45-70 round, and this is a 45 long Colt round. They take the same bullet. They're both 45 calibers. They're both an old style thing, and this is back from another topic you'll bang into. These are straight wall cases. In comparison to what I call a high power, but you can see the actual cartridge is bigger than the bullet. That means there's a lot more power, to push the bullet down the tube. Over here you've got the same size. So these are much more in the old style. This is back in black powder days. We still use them now, of course, in handguns, which is in the 45 long Colt here. The 45-70 is more of the rifle sort of thing, but it's really designed where there's much more about close range sort of stuff. They're a decent heavy bullet. They'll still travel a fair way, but effective ranges are back down in that, 50, 100, 150 yards, 200 yards is where they're effective to because of how much they've slowed down at that stage. I suppose I'll touch quickly on that. Effective is about speed. It's a huge deal with how a bullet operates in terminal ballistics. You need lots of speed. Doesn't mean it stops traveling, doesn't mean it's not dangerous, but being effective and dangerous are two different things. So I'll just go through that quickly again. As an overview of that again, what I'm talking about is the external ballistics, and what I'm actually talking about is how the bullet travels through the air, and really it's about how you choose your round, and the two things that are most effective, the weight of it, that's essentially its engine, the inertia that it carries and how much that inertia keeps it going forward. It's always diminishing, gravity's always fighting it, it's always backing off, but that inertia is the one bit that can fight that resistance that is caused by the air. The other is the shape of it. The smoother it is, the more it can slip through the air, the more it can use its inertia to travel further. So those are the two most important things. The last bit I'd say, and for people who are trying to learn this sort of stuff or trying to get into this sort of stuff, yes, there's lots of research. Those are the core ingredients, but this is not designed to try and let you go and figure it out for yourself. This is just a clue to make it understandable. Always go back to what the manufacturers are recommending to understand things and make sure you're doing things right. When you go in to buy ammunition or you are researching what rifle you want to buy, keep in mind that different weight bullets require different twists. There's different optimal lengths of barrels. There's all sorts of questions to ask to make sure that you're doing it right. But largely, you can trust in what the manufacturers are telling you, the box of ammunition is telling you. You can trust in what your gun shop guy is going to be able to tell you in the basics of what your barrel is and what it can do and what ammunition runs in it. But those are things you should ask. You don't go and buy a box of 30-06 ammo and just run it in anything. You've got to make sure it all makes sense for what you want to do. Anyway, listen, I hope that's some help. I tried to keep that fairly simple and still explain some of that sort of stuff. Like I said, hope it helps. See yous.
Hi guys, Sam here. For folks that are interested in our products that you will have seen in our videos, these are all products that Mark has designed through our experience in ELR shooting. We manufacture them here ourselves. The likes of our adjustable bag bases, bag riders, bipod systems, muzzle brakes, shot data recording sets, and even our great fun little 22 long rifle target. These are all available on our web store, the links to which are below this video, along with our contact information. And guys, we work hard at putting these videos together, so we appreciate all the help we can get. For those of you who haven't subscribed, don't forget and hit the bell so you get notifications of when our videos come out. It would be awesome to get some financial support. So for those of you who can purchase support bids on our web store, which help us bring these videos to you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.